Welcome to today's webinar, everyone, a special interview with one of the analytics community's prominent executives, Joe DeCosmo, the Chief Analytics Officer at Enova International. My name is Katie Prezis with Burtch Works, and I'm the Director of Research and Operations. And today, Burtch Works Financial Services Specialist Meghan Shea will be interviewing Joe about numerous topics. I'm sure you're all very eager to hear a CAO's opinion on everything from the C-suite journey and careers to hiring and the analytics profession. But before we more formally introduce our speakers, I want to quickly go over a few logistics items. First, only the presenters will be able to speak, so your phone lines and microphones are muted. But we welcome questions throughout the interview, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session. I'm sure you guys all have questions for a CAO. So we'll be collecting those via the chat function on the left side of your screen. So please feel free to submit your questions for Joe throughout the talk. If you experience any technical issues, you can submit those through the chat box as well. Finally, today's session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you missed part of it or would like to share it with a colleague, you're welcome to do that. Now, Burtch Works Managing Director Linda Burtch would like to introduce Meghan Shea and Joe DeCosmo. I'm sure many of you already know her, so let's get started. Linda?
Thanks a lot, Katie. First, let me introduce my colleague, Meghan Shea, who will be conducting the interview today with Joe. I've worked with Meghan now for over 10 years, and she is our expert here at Burtch Works in financial analytics recruiting. So this includes things like lending and fraud, credit, regulation, risk analytics, and also the interesting and emerging world of fintech. So she spends pretty much all day, every day, talking to quantitative professionals. So she really knows her stuff. Meghan has been actively involved in Informs and as well as the American Statistical Association for a number of years, and is regularly contributing to our blog with her many insights on financial services. So she has interviewed several financial services experts this year about everything from analytics innovation to the challenges of alternate lending. So I thought she'd be the perfect person to tap for today's interview with Joe. Meghan is also one of the nicest people I know. So Joe, no worries. Meghan is more what I would describe as a softball player, not a hardball player. And I had to just throw in something baseball related after the Cubs win. Go Cubs! So now let's talk about Joe DeCosmo. Joe is a longtime professional acquaintance of mine and also a great friend to myself and Burtch Works. He's one of the clients that would never shake my hand, but sort of reflexively gives me a hug when we see each other, which I really love. Thanks, Joe. Joe is right now the Chief Analytics Officer at Enova International, which many of you know. It's a data-driven online lending company that operates globally, and they use technology to create innovative financial products and services. And before Enova, Joe was the Director and Practice Leader of Advanced Analytics for West Monroe Partners. And he's also held executive positions at HAVI Global Solutions and the Allant Group. Now, Joe has a huge network of analytics contacts through these various roles, and we had a really great turnout of pre-registrants for today's webinar. So I know a lot of his fans are listening in today. So a handful of years ago, I talked Joe into joining the board of the Chicago chapter of the American Statistical Association, and we were very lucky that he accepted. He eventually rose to become president, and under his leadership, the membership and attendance grew significantly. So he also participates in several other professional and university boards, including the DMA and the Chamber of Commerce. And I could go on and on. But it's time to get on with the show. So, Meghan, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate the intro. That was so nice.
Oh, you're welcome. Well deserved. Well deserved.
Thank you. Joe, it's great having you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And Linda, I appreciated the nice intro as well, and I was That sounded like a setup, the whole baseball softball thing. So.
Yeah, right. I had to throw something in, and then, I sort of minorly follow baseball, but I have to admit, I'm a Packers fan, so that's like the only thing I really follow with any sort of, significant passion. And that's through marriage.
So, Joe, I figured we should probably start here with really talking about your journey a bit. As an analytics professional, it really seems like you've been able to transition, quite successfully between a few different industries. So I would love it if you wouldn't mind kind of telling us and the audience a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So it has been an interesting journey for sure. It's been a long one. So I started my career in 1987, back when I was a graduate student, graduate economics student here at U of I Chicago. And I was working at Argonne National Laboratory. So I was in a energy and environmental systems group doing forecasting work, electric utility forecasting, emissions, et cetera. So really focusing on my econometric and time series analysis studies. And that was ultimately my concentration, which was really critical to the rest of my career. I did that for a few years and lived sort of the pseudo-academic life at Argonne, sort of a private-public organization here in Chicago. And then moved on to industry. So I got into, in the early days, telco. So I went into local telephone. I'm aging myself when I talk about Illinois Bell. I actually worked in business research and pricing for Illinois Bell, and probably most of the people on the phone call today, don't probably never were around when Illinois Bell was offering services. But I was doing forecasting work, pricing models, et cetera. So it was a very natural progression in my sort of, based on my econometric studies and experience. After that, I sort of had my fill of that type of work and decided to really wanted to change, and that's where I took the turn into marketing analytics, and I stayed there for the next 20 years at a few different firms, and then my own company as well for 10 years, where really focused on predictive analytics for marketing programs, primarily direct mail and direct marketing at the start, but then later into multi-channel marketing programs. And did that, again, really spent the next 20 years there, and culminated in my position at West Monroe Partners, focusing on advanced and predictive analytics there. And then, 3 years ago, the Enova opportunity opened up, and a chance to join a great Chicago organization, and one still relatively new and dependent on analytics and predictive analytics in virtually everything that we do, and to join them as their leader of the analytics team. And so I made that leap January of 2014, so almost 3 years ago now. So definitely spent, did sort of the research, government-sponsored research, academic work into industry, and then consulting before landing here.
That's really great. One of the things, this is Linda, one of the pieces of advice that I give all of my candidates, and especially the early career people, is that it's really important to make sure you're expanding your industry expertise across a lot of different verticals. And, I say that because then as you first of all, it helps you really understand what you really want to do longer term, what you like, what you're drawn to. But it also allows you to sort of fall back on, different industries as you go up the career ladder. It's very hard to do that once you're making, let's say over $150,000 base or something like that. But earlier on in your career, it's kind of much easier to bounce around. So take advantage of that early on. Mm-hmm. So, and that, I think, Joe, your background sort of illustrates that very well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And kind of from that, Linda, one of the things I was thinking, Joe, that I was wondering if you could maybe share some advice, with the more junior candidates in the space that are looking to make a transition, sometimes that happens, right, from like consumer packaged goods to financial services. Just curious, what your thought is on, how easy that is, and then, should they be doing that?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and Linda, I very much agree with you as well. Right, when you're early on in your career, I think a couple observations. I would say I think it's actually easier to change industries than it was 10, 20 years ago. I think that data science and predictive analytics and sort of good quantitative skills are being used really just in any industry now. You really can't find an industry where it's not in demand, and there's much more similarities than differences. It used to be that if you were doing packaged goods work, CPG type of work, that work was very sort of specific, right, and idiosyncratic, and there wasn't a lot of transferable skills that you learn that you could take to do financial analysis or something else. And I think that's gotten much easier now. I think that the skills and the commonalities among roles, analytics roles from different industries are greater now than they've been in the past. So that's number one. That's a positive thing. And then I would say, in terms of building on Linda's comment, when you're starting out, I think it's much more important to seek out experiences rather than titles or compensation. So I'll say that again.
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah. So I look at my own. Yeah, I mean, I had three. After I got out of graduate school, I had 3 jobs before I changed jobs 3 times before I started my own business. So roughly, 2 years at a pop, and those were lateral, if not slight reductions in. They were at most lateral changes in salary. But what I was doing, I was seeking out roles that added to my experience, that added to my skills, and that's way more important when you're starting out than getting a fancy title or getting a 10 or 20% raise for a job that's really not going to set you up longer term for success. And so I think that's really, really critical. You need to think those first 10 years in your career, think about experience and skill development rather than compensation growth or title progression.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think there's also this understanding, or I'm talking to candidates a lot about what are the compelling reasons that you're looking right now. So what are those things that motivate you, and exactly what is it besides title or money? What are the things that really matter in terms of what you're seeking and what you see for your future? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Curious to your thought on this. I think this has certainly. I've seen this a lot more often, in the last 5 years or so, the frequency of job changes. So it seems like I'm seeing a lot more candidates that are kind of jumping around more year to year versus every 5 or 6 years. So was curious what your thought was about that, and how often is too often in your point of view?
Yeah, I don't have a real specific answer here. I mean, for sure, I think that job changes are more common these days than in the past. I don't know if there's a magic formula for like what's too much or what's a red flag to us. I mean, I think if I see, 5 or 6, less than 12 months positions with different companies, or maybe 4 or 5, less than 12-month positions, it's certainly going to raise questions for us about the candidate. What I would say, though, is that if you are changing jobs, that you should make sure that it sort of fits in a larger sort of story about what you're seeking in your career, right? You don't want to. You can't just be that, this job wasn't the right fit, 4 times in a row. That that it's better if there's a reason, if there's a reason why you chose a particular job and chose to move to that job after 18 months or 2 years. The other thing I would say is that there are times when a very, very short duration at a job, I might actually view it as a positive thing, right? If I see somebody, maybe took a job and was only there a few months, it's not unlikely to make a decision and take a job under some expectation and find out that it just isn't going to work out, right? And I think in those cases, if you're able to recognize that very quickly and then, either try to rectify that or make a change, I see where that could actually be kind of a positive thing because you're being decisive about your career. Again, I would go back to if that happens, 3-4 times in a row, then it's going to raise red flags for sure about the individual. So again, no magic formula. I think that you always want to be able to explain, your moves as if you were going towards something rather than away from something. So towards some new experience or new set of skills rather than away from an unhappy situation. If you can do that, then I think, job changes aren't necessarily a problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's a piece of it that has to do with really, telling the story or kind of connecting the dots of the history that you have with your job so far, and that making sense into this bigger picture. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Right. So, was thinking too on the flip side of this, do you have any tips really for, let's say, some of the more junior, candidates that are kind of in the audience related to the job search? So, maybe you have a couple of interview questions you ask that tend to trip people up, or, was curious on kind of how you weigh the tech skills versus, potential of a candidate. And then also the other piece of this on communication. So, there seems to be a pretty big emphasis on that as well. So, any tips on how to get better at that?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Sorry, I was clearing my throat there. You choked me up with that question.
Oh no, it was very meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to pass on the opportunity to share share some of our interview questions.
Oh.
So I won't do that, but I'll say I'll give you first our approach, and we have a pretty rigorous approach to interviewing candidates, and we test for skills and we interview for fit, right? So we test for hard quantitative skills. We do data analysis. We'll give the candidate a data set and give them a set of questions and have them go through and try to answer those questions. We'll have another interview where we get a sense of their programming or coding abilities, right? Where we give them some sort of toy problems and see how they can solve it through programming. So we don't just we don't just have a conversation about your technical skills. We present you with problems and little tests to demonstrate them to us. So that's number one. Then we interview for fit, and there's really sort of three sets of interviews that we use. One is more of a business problem solving, so it's less technical, but it's you're presented with a business case or business problem, and we want to get sort of a sense of your business acumen and how you would go about solving this particular business problem. It's less quantitative and more sort of thought process and problem solving. Then we have folks do sort of a walkthrough of their projects and things they're proud of and work, and we want to get a sense for, their ability to for leadership growth, We want to get a sense for their ability to engage effectively with their business partners. Our brand owners here, we have 11 brands at Enova, and they all have marketing teams and finance teams and operations teams, and we want to get a sense for their ability to engage with a non-technical stakeholder. So we want to hear how they've had to do that. We want to, walk us through some of your projects that you've done and see how you would explain that to a non-technical counterpart. And then the last piece is cultural fit, right? So we want to get a sense for just the personality and attitude of the individual and make sure that this is someone we would want to work with, right? So they may have the skills, they may have the business acumen, but if you're a jerk, we're not going to hire you.
Good idea.
And we've been very successful at that. I mean, I've given some talks around, and even brilliant jerks aren't worth the effort and worth adding to your team, because they can upset the dynamic of a team very quickly. And so that's the last piece, is we want to get a sense for that cultural fit too. I think overall it's a pretty effective process. It's challenging for sure with our candidates, and I actually think the fact that it's a challenging process and the technical side is challenging as well as the other pieces, it's actually a positive for us in the candidates' eyes, because they want to work somewhere where the bar is high and where they're surrounded by other people who are the best and the brightest. And so we want to keep that interview process pretty rigorous, and we want it to be hard, but not hard in the way we're not trying to disqualify you, right? We want you to be successful. We'd like to be able to make you an offer, but we want to make sure you're up to the standard. And so I think that actually reflects positively on the candidates too when they come through. The advice I would give is a couple things. One is I would have some kind of portfolio of your work, so projects, models that you've built, programs that you've written. If you've got GitHub, code in GitHub that you can share, I would be prepared to bring that and share that with us and with the interviewers, because again, it's sort of the difference between talking about something and doing something. The other thing is, on the communication front, is that work hard on getting that being good at that communication with non-technical counterparts. At the end of the day, that's probably going to be as important in your career progression as your hard technical skills. And so
I totally agree, Joe. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time on my side too.
Yeah. And so look for opportunities either at your current role or in school. Look for opportunities to build those skills, give presentations, get involved in groups where you're going to, do projects outside of your coursework and then have to explain those projects to others. Seek out those opportunities, because that last piece is as important as the others.
It absolutely is. I think that that's the number one complaint that we get, or concern, I guess, we get from clients is, that ability to communicate and just sort of an overall understanding of business, so business acumen. And I sometimes I throw that back to my clients and say, listen, part of your responsibility is to bring these people up to speed on things like that. If they're in an academic environment, they're really focused on the analytics piece of things, and it's rigorous. It's it's not trivial stuff that they're learning here, so they really have to focus hard on that and spend a lot of time on it. The business acumen side of things is something that they can pick up on as they're working. So it's important to sort of keep that in mind if you're a hiring manager too. So also, one of the, I can understand, Joe, why you might not want to let the audience know what specific questions you might ask during the course of the interview. But I was thinking that it'd be really interesting for us to get from the audience what are some of the toughest questions you've had during the course of an interview. And then what we can do is put those all together and share it with the audience, so they can maybe think about and prepare for some of those tougher questions. So, so if you do have, audience members, if you do have some questions that you think might be useful for other people to know about that you've encountered during the course of an interview, shoot those in through the chat box, and we'll be happy to put those together for you guys and shoot it out.
Excellent. Yeah. So wanted to kind of start moving a little quickly here. We've been working really well talking together, but let's move on a little bit here. So I just wanted to touch quickly on this with you, Joe, about kind of finding strong talent in the analytics space. You've definitely told us about the process a bit, but was curious about how you have approached growing the team at Enova. With this sort of difficulty, and any examples you might have of challenges you faced, and sort of tips on how to staff in the space itself.
So we've doubled the size of the analytics team since so when I got here it was roughly 20, low 20s on our analytics team, and now we're at 52 on the analytics team in 2.5 years. So we've more than doubled the size of the team over that time, and it's a mix of college hires and analyst level hires, and then some more senior experienced hires as well. So a couple things that I think how we've addressed this. One is we've got a full-time dedicated internal corporate recruiter that is dedicated to analytics. She's been working with us now she was actually supporting analytics prior to my arrival here. So she's now been working with us for about 3 years, and we consider her an honorary member of our analytics team. So that's important because she really understands what we're looking for, the kind of candidates that are successful here, and plays a very, very proactive role with us in recruiting. So that's number one. It gives us I know when I talk to some of my peers, that's an advantage I have that others don't. The other thing I would say is we're very active in a lot of the academic programs here in the Midwest, primarily Midwest universities, but a few out east and southeast as well. That we're very active. We do webinars, we host meetups, we do data competitions, analytics competitions. We call them data smackdowns that we do on campus. So that's really important that we keep we want to make sure we have a good brand on campus, and we keep that exposure up throughout the year, not just when there's a career fair, and show up once a year for a career fair and then go away. So that's we've written articles in alumni magazines, student magazines, etc. So that's the next thing. And then as far as experienced hires go, we stay very active in a lot of the meetups and associations. So Linda already mentioned my Chicago chapter of the American Stats Association involvement, but also in our users groups and other groups, informs, local informs are very active in as well, local and national actually. And so that really gives us, I think, a chance to get exposure to more of the experienced folks and the more senior folks out there, and just building up our networks, making sure that myself and all our hiring managers have good networks that they're caring for and can reach out to when we have positions and we're looking for more experienced hires.
Absolutely, that makes sense.
But Joe, you forgot one important tool.
What's that?
Burtch Works.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. And then
Right.
working with you guys, we worked with you guys on some of our more challenging positions as well. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you Linda, you've been in analytics recruiting your whole career, so there's certainly no one here in Chicago that knows the market better, and yeah, it's a great resource for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit and focus a bit on the analytics at Enova, so that we're able to chat a bit about this. I know for you, Joe, operationalizing the analytics probably is a pretty tough nut to crack. So I was curious about sort of what you've done to sort of solve this, and any advice you might have for people in a similar role who are approaching this difficult task.
Yeah, it's actually this is another case of me being very fortunate to be here at Enova. I mean, analytics is really the core. Analytics and technology is the core of our whole company, right? We can't be successful if we don't build good credit risk models and fraud models, et cetera, and then not be able to operationalize them. So, so we've invested actually very heavily in building a real-time platform for all of our models. That every model we build sits in a platform we call Colossus. It's something we've built over the last couple of years, and it's not at all a blocker or a pain point for us. So we're far out. I always, again, when I'm out talking to others in the industry, we're far out on the maturity level when it comes to real-time embedded analytics in your business. So virtually every decision we make with our customers, from application through customer service, is driven by models that are built by our teams and then live in our real-time platform, right? And so when a customer interacts with us, those models get fired and we produce scores, and then those scores determine the next action. So it's a capability that is core to our business from the beginning, and to the point now where that's what we're offering through Enova Decisions. So we launched our analytics brand, which is our newest brand here at Enova, called Enova Decisions, in January of this year, which is taking that predictive analytics and real-time expertise and offering it as a service to other companies as well. So we consider it actually, it's not a challenge for us. It's something we've invested in really from the beginning, and have really created what I consider to be sort of a world-class platform now for that type of work. But I recognize that we're in the minority. Not many companies can say that, and not many companies have the sort of seamless transition from doing analysis and building models and getting those models deployed into production for your business.
Right.
In my consulting world, in my consulting life, that most every company had that challenge, right? Very few companies had the ability to easily operationalize and deploy analytics well.
Yeah, I think it's very important if you're going into a role where the maturity of the analytics capability is young, that you make sure that there's very strong support from the top, and that the business unit stakeholders at least have some buy-in to why this makes sense. So that's something that during the course of an interview, and especially if you're at the mid-level or more senior level, absolutely critical that you sort of ferret that out.
Yeah, and we even go so far as, with our team, right? Building a really elegant, powerful predictive model is not enough. If you can't get the business to buy into that model and then get that model deployed, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but it's almost like that model didn't happen, right?
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
the expectation is on our analysts and our analytics team too, is that it's not just building the models that's important. It's then getting your business stakeholder to believe in the model and then deploy the model, right? You need to complete that loop, and that's how we view everything here at Enova.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So wanted to quickly touch on, all of this real-time decisioning we've been talking about quite a bit here. There certainly are just a lot of candidates now who, really seem to be much more interested in, kind of beyond working with, just the structured transactional data, and they really are interested in moving into, web data or Internet of Things data. So at Enova, are you all sort of training up your predictive analytics people to work with these tools? Just thinking like Python and R and, Hadoop and Spark and all of that.
Yeah. So for sure we are. So we actually are primarily an R and Python shop. So most of our analysts, the majority of our analysts these days do their work in R or Python or some combination of those things. Because we have Colossus is a common deployment platform. So you can sort of do your modeling work in whatever, and this is how we do this on purpose. We let the analysts sort of develop their models in whatever of those tools they're most comfortable in and most effective in. Now, we have a set process we go through in building models, so they go through that, but they can follow, we have that process built out for R, Python, and then a couple other analytic tools. But those models all get deployed in the same way to Colossus. So it sort of separates, gives the analysts the freedom to work in the tools they're most effective in. So that's number one. As far as the real-time data, so we get, we're all of our decisions are being made in real time. So all customers are interacting with us. So whether it's a loan application or interacting on their account on the website or in our call center or whatever. So we've got very fast-moving data all the time in our systems. It's mostly structured data. So it's credit reports, it's bank statements, it's web blog type of information. It's a lot of data. It's fast-moving data, but it's mostly structured. So Hadoop doesn't buy us a whole lot. However, we do use we're using Spark more and more because Spark does give us the ability to greatly speed up a lot of the processing work as well. And so that's where we see sort of the newer technologies being more impactful to us. So the ability to do to speed up the throughput of this stuff as opposed to manage a more diverse set of data more effectively.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, so just the sort of last question here, what I thought I would ask you, Joe, is to sort of look into your crystal ball and just kind of tell us any sort of, predictions about the future and sort of what you see for the profession of analytics overall. So
overall, I see the profession of analytics as very, very promising. I would say that certainly in my career, the demand has never been higher for analytics and data science talent, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think, my prediction is that virtually every business, every industry is going to have, some type of an advanced predictive analytics function. I think more and more analytics will be used to automate, previously manual decisions or processes. In our world, that's sort of the world of automated underwriting now that we live in. But I think more and more of that will happen in other industries. So whether it's healthcare or insurance or other even heavy industry, right? heavy industry with the machine data. So I think it will be, that's definitely, that trend is going to continue, and the skills for data science and predictive analytics are going to continue to be in very high demand. I think there will be more chief analytics officers. I think, more companies are realizing that, how they use how they gather their data and then how they use it for business decision making is going to become more important at the executive level, and we'll see more and more, C-level positions that are dedicated to just that. I report to the CEO, so I don't report to marketing or finance or technology. I'm an equal member of the team with those folks, and I think that will become more common as well.
Yes, I'm hoping so, because one of the things that so many of my clients are looking for is, how do we structure this to make it most effective? And sometimes you'll see it under finance, sometimes you'll see it under marketing, sometimes you'll see it even under IT, and I'm just not sure that it naturally belongs under any of those. So, reporting up through right directly to the CEO, to me, makes tons of sense. So, and it sort of goes back to what I was saying 20 years ago. I remember, I've always believed that my candidates are so darn smart that they should be the ones running these companies, and now it looks like that's going to come true. So I'm really excited about the future of this. I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So it's a very exciting time.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Joe, for this. It was very interesting, fun. So I am going to turn this back over to Katie, because I know we have a number of questions lined up. So,
yes, thanks, Linda. What a great interview. For all of you listening, you can also follow us if you want more information from Burtch Works. Obviously, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook to stay up to date with our research and flash surveys. We have career tips and webinars there. And also take a look at on Twitter at Enova Decisions to see what Joe's up to. Now, on the Burtch Works blog, too, you can find our flash surveys, career insights, trends we're watching out for. And Meghan also has interviews up there with FICO CAO Scott Zoldi and FinTech Insider Jason Dell. So I know you've all been waiting to ask Joe your questions, and we've had some great ones come in already. But don't forget, you can continue to submit them through the chat box if you like, as we're going through this Q&A session here. So Joe, kind of first question, I guess, how did you make the transition from an individual contributor into more management roles?
To be perfectly honest, I just sort of sought out the opportunities to, even as I was an individual contributor, to, manage projects or manage teams where I'm not sort of directly responsible for the individual or for the team, but I'm responsible for the output, right? And so I sort of sought opportunities like that out early on in my career, and then the management, the formal management responsibilities sort of, followed on that pretty naturally. So I never let, sort of the job description limit me too much. I would work with I remember early on one of my bosses, I would say, why don't you let me take these three, types of work, and let me take those off your plate and run them, and you can go focus on these other three things. And so, I think it's just being willing to step up and start to find areas where you can start to take responsibility even before you're formally granted it, through a promotion or something else.
Perfect. That's great advice, Joe. This is a question that maybe you can answer, Joe, or Linda, I'm sure you have thoughts about this too. someone wrote in and said that they've definitely seen an increase in the number of data science positions out there. Should predictive analytics people apply for those positions? Joe, I'm not sure if you use both titles on your team, what your thoughts are on that.
So I would say, first I'd say yes, predictive analytics professionals should apply to those. We do have both those titles existing on our teams. Now here, the data science title here is specific to one group in analytics, which really owns our Colossus platform. So it's more of your focus is more on the data sort of in motion, dealing with the data as it moves through our systems, and then managing a platform that runs all our models. So we sort of limit that title to that group. Now, having said that, none of this stuff is super, this, Linda. I mean, none of this stuff is well defined, right? So
Right.
You see overlaps everywhere. You see a position for a data scientist when really what they're, it's really more of an analyst position, or it's you're building models as opposed to doing end-to-end, gathering data, preparing data, et cetera. So, I would say I wouldn't get too hung up on the different titles. There's not sort of a common definition or common agreement, and I think it seems to me it's almost a little random as to when a position's described as a predictive analytics position versus a data science position.
Yeah, there is. It's very, very gray still. I do think, though, if you're a predictive analytics person, as we define it, working with structured data, and are interested in getting, jumping into this whole world of streams of data and unstructured data and messy data and all that kind of thing, there's so many resources out there now, and a lot of my candidates tell me that they, on the side, are involved with with MOOCs, and they're looking into boot camps, they're reading, they're attending free webinars, and a lot of organizations too are very willing to support those kinds of efforts too for their people, which I think is just terrific. So you need to bone up. You need to you can't just apply and sort of expect magic to happen. You really need to sort of make things happen for yourself too, which I think tons of people are taking advantage of that. I love that.
And I would go back to one of my opening comments early is save your work. If you do that, if you take advantage of those kind of things on the side, is make sure you have a portfolio of that work, the code you wrote, the models you built, right? Save all that too. So again, you're not just talking about it. You can show the person across the table, here's actually what I did.
Right. Great. Joe, I know you mentioned that there's a couple kind of main tools and platforms you guys use at Enova, but when you're evaluating like resumes of potential hires, do they have to have those skills coming in, or are there certain programming languages or softwares that you look for in their skill set?
Yeah, so I'd say it depends on the level we're hiring at, right? So, but having said that, we generally look for some combination of the following four things: R, Python, SAS, and then SQL. Right. So we'll look for, pretty much with all of our candidates, we'll look for some combination of all those things, and then depending on whether it's an entry-level hire or a more experienced hire, the level of expertise or skills in one or more of those tools varies. If it's a college hire, college graduate, entry-level hire, we're willing to take, a novice in any of those areas as long as they've demonstrated to us their ability to, be a fast learner and have good sort of problem-solving skills, et cetera. As you get more senior, more experienced, obviously, we'll want you to be a little more expert in one or more of those tools so you can hit the ground running.
You just kind of touched on a piece of this, and I think you may have mentioned it a little bit earlier, but someone asked if you could elaborate on some of the qualities or softer skills that you kind of evaluate when you're trying to find a good fit in a potential candidate.
Sure. Number one is friendliness. we like nice people. We prefer nice people. I can tell you, we did have a story of a candidate who was sort of marginal for us on all the other interviews, but in one of the interviews they spent the first 5 minutes complaining about our coffee, and that it was bad coffee, So we did not go any further with that candidate. So I'd say number one is that, and then I would go back to the communication skills and to be able to explain in non-technical terms how you've solved some technical problem, whether it's in coursework or in a previous position, and be able to explain that clearly and simply, or how you dealt with a challenging problem, right, where you had poor performing team members, or you had a business stakeholder that was very difficult, and being able to explain, how you handled that situation well. And that's more about your interpersonal skills and leadership abilities than any technical skills. So, I guess that's how I'd answer that question. Don't complain about the coffee when you go interview somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's
great.
about it's about positive attitude. It's about the ability to the ability and the interest to learn new things, because it's really about lifelong learning. Starting now, or actually starting back 5 years ago. It's really that has become a very important success factor, I think, for most candidates.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Joe, I have kind of a more business-related question for you. How do you approach the business justification for building out longer-term analytics capabilities? And do you find that your projects have to return value in a short time frame or a longer period of time? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the project or the nature of the project. So anything we do in analytics has an ROI or a business value sort of criteria and estimation behind it. So when we recommend a new, say, credit model for one of our brands, we provide with that scenarios as to say, if we can improve performance by X, this leads to, this overall improvement in loan performance and in profitability of the brand. And so, but in those cases, that's more of a short-term focus. Generally, that's ROI per month or annual ROI. In a project like that, it might be a 4-week modeling project, right? When we look at something like Colossus, which we invested, 18 months and about upwards of, $5 million in the platform itself, that's actually a much longer term proposal. And for that, we sort of mapped out, what's sort of the 3-year, 5-year kind of ROI on having a better platform for our models and for real-time decisioning. So it sort of depends on the nature of the project and the size and duration of it. But again, they all have, we don't undertake anything without some idea of the ROI that's going to be returned on the back end of that project.
Perfect. Well, I think that is about all the time that we have for today. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really great. People have been asking lots of questions, and we're just running out of time here. But appreciate your time, all the great insights. If anyone would like additional information, feel free to email us info@burtchworks.com. A recording of today's session is also going to be up on our YouTube channel in case you want to relive it or share it with your colleagues. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.